Welcome, everybody. My name is Keith Blackmore. I'm one of the producers for Vancouver Spark Animation Festival. Well, if you've ever had the opportunity to experience Disneyland's California Adventure, or Disney MGM Studios in Orlando, or Tokyo Disneyland, or Tokyo Disney Sea, or Shanghai Disney, or perhaps you've taken a cruise on the Disney Wish, then you have experienced the dreams of Imagineer Bob Weis. For 40 years, Bob oversaw these projects that continue to entertain audiences around the world while working for the Walt Disney Company. And now, in a new memoir, Dream Chasing, Bob has written about those 4 decades of success and failure with Walt Disney Imagineering. And today, our guest is, of course, Bob Weis. Welcome, Bob.
Keith, I'm so happy to talk to you, and thanks so much for the opportunity.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, what inspired you to write this memoir? How did you start thinking about your personal thoughts and dreams and putting them down?
Well, I was kind of semi-retiring from being active at Imagineering, although I was playing what we call an ambassador role, which people have played kind of late in their careers, where you do more mentorship and more kind of going around to schools and going around, talking about Imagineering. And I got into a reflective mood, I guess, and started thinking about things. And uh, I had started writing more seriously, maybe than I had ever written in my life since college. Probably, I started writing during COVID as a kind of a creative release, and just started putting thoughts together. And there's a wonderful editor at Disney Press who has been done all she's done I think she's done 400 books about the parks. uh, this is not about animation or other parts of Disney. This is all related to Disney parks. 400 titles, and she convinced me that I could do it. And when you have somebody like that supporting you, it helps a lot. I didn't have a ghostwriter. She didn't write for me. She was a great editor, great advisor. um, but I feel really glad that I got it down on paper. It's my story. It doesn't mean there aren't others who would tell stories about the same era. This is the way I remember it, and I'm excited to share it.
Yeah, no, and it truly is that a memoir, a personal memoir, because you could easily take apart one of those stories and just look at, for example, Tokyo Disney and
Right.
how that from concept to the execution and how it came about. There's so much. So there's, pardon me. Well, you've written about some of those challenges
Yeah.
that you faced at Imagineering. Um, can you share just one of those challenges from the book that had a really lasting impact on you and how you approach design?
Well, one thing about my earliest part of my career at Imagineering, which I now count as being very lucky, is um, when I joined, we were really the second generation of Imagineers. The first generation was the people who worked directly for Walt Disney and were recruited by Walt Disney and built Disneyland. And when the company expanded and Walt had died and they were going to do Epcot in Florida, his sort of known as his last dream, they were recruiting heavily for that. And I was out there. I interviewed. Had a potentially a couple of jobs on Epcot in Florida, and I went across the street to this little office, and it was a top secret project called Tokyo Disneyland, and it was agreed to by the management only under the terms that Epcot was the company's priority, and all the company's wealth was landed on Epcot. Really was risked on Epcot. Much smaller company at that time. So Oriental Land Company was the partner in Japan, and they were to basically pay for everything, and we were going to be advisors to them to help them translate Disneyland to Japan. And I just thought that sounds like an enormous challenge. But I mean, you got to go back, uh, Keith, to 1980. Japan is much different than it was in 1980. And so that alone was a unique challenge. We learned a lot. I'm going to shift my chair for the sun. And it was also we were kind of the second position, you know, the big hot project. Excuse me for this. I'm messing up your video, but I feel like I'm in shadow.
No worries.
Maybe that's a little better.
Right.
The kind of the A team was all on Epcot, and a small number of people went over, worked in Tokyo, but we learned how to work with Disney in an international context, multi-language, and we couldn't do it by ourselves, so we had to recruit talent over there. And as a result, the park, since its beginning, really has always been multicultural. It's been the best of Disney and the best of Japan, and so I feel really lucky. That was my first big challenge, and I learned a lot from it.
I thought that was interesting when whether it was in Tokyo or in Shanghai, or I guess even in Paris, though you didn't have as much involvement with Paris.
Yeah.
You were specific. You always said distinctly Japanese or distinctly Chinese, and you kept to the culture because they view Disney through their own prism and what their look at Disney. So you come into it with maybe your own ideas coming from California, what Disneyland is, but then that culturally they're different.
Yeah, and you know, filmmakers, and I relate this. I'm so happy you do this animation festival. That you know, I relate this to filmmakers in the sense that a film gets done, you know, and it gets put in the can. In the old days, put in the can, right? And with exception maybe of a few culturally sensitive edits and dubbing the language, not much else happens to it when it goes around the world.
Yeah.
And it's an international language, which is great. And I would say Disney Parks is also an international language, and we've found that no matter where you go, there's people who develop a love and, you know, a sense of ownership of the parks. But the thing is, the park stays there forever. The park stays there. And so year after year after year, it's like you were a movie that is never finished. And you just keep adding and you change and you modify and you get to know the audience better and the audience gets to know you better. And as that process happens, it becomes more localized and you learn a lot. And then you start to learn things that you could bring back to the US that you think, well, that was an interesting idea they developed in Japan. Why don't we do that here? So it is a wonderful cultural exchange that goes on. And I remember when we started Tokyo, or I'm sorry, I had worked on Tokyo and we started Shanghai. This is, you know, 20 years later, 25 years later. And a lot of scholars and experts told us that the Chinese would not have the emotional connection that the Japanese had with Tokyo Disneyland, which is extraordinary. I mean, they dress up, they bring Duffy dolls with them. I mean, it's a real adoption of Disneyland culture in Japan. And now, 7 or 8 years later, when you go, I was just there, I was just in Shanghai, you feel the same ownership. You feel the same complete cultural connection that Tokyo had. Maybe not quite as dress up crazy and role play crazy, that kind of thing, but you definitely feel it. You definitely feel it now. So that's really gratifying to see.
One of the things that, of course, in teaching animation, and we're always with film, it's always about storytelling and characters. And of course, we're evolving it's art and a combination of art and technology. All film is about art and technology.
Sure.
And I didn't really appreciate it as much. I knew that for the parks are art and technology, but I never really thought about it as storytelling. And that you really Imagineering balances that aspect of storytelling, art, and technology. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, we certainly, you know, we talk a lot about today about immersive storytelling.
Mhm.
And I think the parks were the first, whether they're Disney or others, are the first immersive storytelling, where in animation or filmmaking, you can make a beautiful job on screen. What we do is try to take stories into a world, into a physical world, where you're actually in it, and you are walking through it, and you're smelling, tasting, feeling, hearing, an environment around you. But it's still like a game, like a movie. It's still a story. It's still a made up environment, but we do everything we can to put you in a place, whether it's a place that is a fantasy, like from Frozen or from Marvel, or a place that existed, like, a part of Europe or a part of Asia or something. We want you to feel it and live it. And we also, I think there's a great sense of trying for um, well-being, a sense of well-being. That the parks um, are a day away from daily life with your friends or your family or however you choose to go to the park. Um, and you come away with a kind of an uplifting sense that I asked John Hench, who was a longtime leader of Imagineer, worked with Walt, what it all meant one time. He's about 90 years old. What it all meant, and he said it's. We used to say to the guest, "You're going to be okay, fella." It's almost like the world's not so terrible. You're going to be okay. It's a reset. So you are telling stories, but you're also telling them in I think it's a sort of aspirational, uplifting way.
I thought it's interesting as well in your book. You talk about how, of course, the parks evolve. I mean, what was good in the 60s doesn't always necessarily work in the 1990s or 2000s. So,
Right.
with
Big
Epcot,
difference.
yeah, it's a continual evolution. So you bring in that Marvel. I never really thought about, for example, you describe how you bring in Guardians of the Galaxy and telling that story
Yeah.
through. I just go there to experience a thrill, but for
Yeah.
you, it's a completely you're combining all of those other aspects. Your perspective on creating that ride is so different.
Yeah. Especially today, I would say the perspective in the last however many years, 20 years maybe, has moved away from the idea that what Imagineering does is book reports.
Mm.
The idea of book report is you take a film and you try to represent it in a ride, right? And we now try to create original experiences that are inspired. They're often inspired by other media. So to do Pirates of the Caribbean as an example in Shanghai, um, from the time that Disneyland first had Pirates of the Caribbean to Shanghai when we were developing that, all those Pirates movies had come out and they were distributed internationally. And so the audience's perception of a Disney Pirates experience was this massive uh, panorama, as you know.
Mm.
Um, and so we set out to create an experience in those worlds um, that felt real, felt like we could take you to the bottom of the ocean, we could haul you back up, we could put you in the middle of a battle. I think the same thing with um, uh, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. We didn't really want to duplicate a specific Star Wars experience from one movie. We wanted the land to stand alone for a long time. So there's no question it's a land that is based on Star Wars and has the Star Wars characters in it, but it also has its own time and place and the people who work there are characters now. It's so it's really an immersive world that we put you in.
Yeah. We talked about some of the challenges you had, but also you're collaborating with so many people around the world, and again, different languages, different cultures. What was one partnership that you had that really had a profound influence on a specific project?
Well, one thing I'll tell you is about a guy that you may hear about in your festivals. His name is Roger Gould, and he started out as a director at Pixar. He's still a director at Pixar, but he got into a real specialty. And Disney has these robotic figures. We call them audio animatronics figures that go back to Abraham Lincoln at the New York World's Fair.
Yeah.
And the technology had improved over the years at a very slow pace, the robotics technology. And a lot of us, including me, we over the years we started using these figures less and less because they were kind of slow and expensive and lumbering and And so we're
Outdated.
all
Yeah.
outdated and hard to update. And so we started using them less. Media was easier to use, dimensionally.
Mhm.
And I really credit Roger, who came in and said, look, why don't we figure out how the animation of Elsa, let's say from Frozen, can really match Elsa in the film. And that even the animator who did Elsa can animate for a ride, that we can have a seamless production transition between rigging and creating a character for a movie and engineering and developing a character for a ride. And that's a huge amount of focus that Roger put in. And that's why we were able to do uh, things like Radiator Springs with John Lasseter's film Cars, where the figures are cars, they're huge, big, uh, they're it's not like a movie. They actually do weigh a ton.
Wow.
and but they talk and they have personality.
Right.
And same thing with characters like, I mentioned Elsa. You look at a figure like Elsa or many of the animated characters, their wrists are so small relative to their body proportions. So how do you get hand motion, into, we have to deal with gravity and motion and things like that. So the translation between the great engineering of Imagineering and the ingenuity of Imagineering and Roger's passion for really connecting. If you saw this character in a film, we want that character to feel the same in the park, feel the same like we're seeing the same character. That's a huge amount of development in the last couple of decades that we couldn't have done without Roger, and really has changed the face of a lot of Disney rides.
Yeah. I can't stop thinking about collaboration because never mind the foreign collaborations with the different countries and peoples there, but your team, even in the Imagineering team, and the amount of skills and art and technology and creativity that is in behind that has to bring everything together. I mean, maybe you could talk about some of those different departments and peoples that are in
Oh,
that whole Imagineering, because we say, oh, it's Bob Weiss, he's ahead, but it's like thousands
yeah,
behind.
it really is a lot of people, and we tend to say there's about 100 disciplines.
Yeah. Oh,
And
wow.
this is only inside Imagineering. So if you start with obvious ones like artists and storytellers and writers and sketch artists and sculptors and uh, production designers, and you start with that level, but then you get into ride engineers and effects engineers and programming and production and the artistry of producing things. But then you get into things like, you might not think of, but like we have a stained glass expert um, who designs and builds stained glass all over the world, or language experts. So safety.
Mm.
We have people that are experts in in motion sickness. How do you make sure people can ride things without getting sick? And is it different in one culture to another? Um, so it is a group of people that surprisingly work together really well.
Yeah.
And they all work together. First of all, I think the character of Imagineering has always kind of felt like a little university. It sort of feels like a casual university campus. People get to know each other in the street and stuff like that. So it's casual, but there's an underlying passion for quality and for storytelling. And I think most people who come over, like if you come over from animation or if you come over from Marvel, where they're making movies, um, people get enchanted by Imagineering because it's a pretty open. It's not a very closed environment. It's very open. It's very uh, just casual and passionate about the product.
There's a lot of sharing, sounds like there's just a
Lots
lot.
of sharing, lots of brainstorming sessions. I think that's one of the things that, for me, during COVID, we were looking for every way that we could to bring people together physically or by Zoom. I worried about people getting too consumed by Zoom because um, there's something about a group of creative people around a table, creative and technical people around a table, seeing the same thing, talking, conversing, that you just can't duplicate. I don't think you can duplicate on screen. and boards in the room, cards in the rooms, sketching madly, that kind of thing. I think we did our best that you could possibly do. Uh, but there's no substitute, I think, for the human collaboration side of this thing.
I'm with you completely. I agree. Yeah. And you've, in your book, you highlight how so many people help mentor you and lead you. And now you're a mentor, you're a leader.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice from your time there that still resonates with you as in regards your insights onto leadership?
What I'd say that one of the big things is that the particularly the Imagineering process is not really a director driven process like a movie is. It's highly collaborative, and you, as long as you can get everybody kind of going in the right direction, in the same direction from a story point of view, which is hard, but that's what you have to do. Um, then you can kind of trust that everyone's going to have the same point of view, and everybody's going to improve on that point of view. Um, there's a restaurant in Cars movie that's based on big highway cones, the big orange highway cones.
Right.
And we built that full size as a cones restaurant, or the cones walk up restaurant. And everybody puts, you say cones and you say theme and you say story, and everybody just kind of. And I remember walking through close to opening, and they were planting this tree next to the restaurant, and here's this tree has these little orange flowers hanging from them that look exactly like highway cones. So you can even trust that the landscape architecture, the ornamental horticulture people, everybody's going to be trying to tell the same story. And so that is a very unique environment to manage in, because you want people to run out. You kind of want to let them run, and then you're more about guiding them. Maybe we got to pull that in a little bit. That might be a little bit too much. That might be, too
Yeah.
expensive for what we're trying to do. But I've always seen it as a kind of a, a sketchy management, not a hard line management. You know, it's just highly collaborative, and you want everybody to have fun. You want everybody to feel like they're part of the eventual product. But you do have to steer people, right? Walt Disney referred to it as like walking eight dogs. Dogs are going in all directions. You're trying to somehow guide them through.
Right.
Um, but it is a different style of management. And one of the big reasons why I wrote the book, actually, and I got a wonderful back cover. I don't know if you saw it, from Simon Sinek. Um, um, and
Yeah.
Simon was very generous with his time to read the book, but I wanted the book to be not just about Disney and about Imagineering, but about so many companies, so many organizations, who do depend on collaboration, depend on chasing dreams to reality. And just to have an idea is great, but it takes a lot to get it done. It takes a huge amount, this from animation, it takes a huge amount of effort to get something done. And often you have to lead a lot of people to get it done. So that's hoping there will be some uh, feedback from creative business and innovative business also about mentorship in creative organizations.
Well, and to that point, you have worked, your bio in the back talks about that you served as a consultant for the Kennedy Space Center, the Smithsonian, the Rockefeller Center, the U.S. Navy, the Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry. So you're more than just something with Disney. You're doing these immersive experiences around the world with others as well.
I always felt it was important to have Imagineers have different problems to work on, but besides parks, because I think it helps having a different perspective. And we were always kind of a protected, top secret, until Leslie Iwerks did her multi-part series for the Disney Plus. I think we were always kind of secretive. And thanks to her, we're more open now. But I brought in the Mayo Clinic. We brought in a group from the United Nations, from National Geographic, before it was a part of Disney, for brainstormings on their topics. We worked for the Smithsonian African American Experience Museum, so that Imagineers had a chance to think about the problems of other organizations. And also, we usually left those organizations with a sense of more free thinking and more like shake up their own point of view,
Mhm.
right? And so I think we figured out how to do it. We did it mostly with nonprofits because we could get the company to agree. It was anything that was a profit making thing, they'd say, well, it's competitive with Disney because Disney's into almost anything. But we did do it with nonprofits and really enjoyed that process of working on other people's. You take a week off and you think about the future of the Mayo Clinic. It really opens your eyes.
Yeah. And it's amazing how art and technology is evolving so fast in the last, especially with the digital revolution, and being able to adapt those things into imagining into your role there at
Yeah.
and learning from what others are doing, say the Cirque du Soleil or other theme parks or other peoples and such, like you say with the Mayo or the Smithsonian and such, to bring those, incorporate them. But
Yeah, I think there was a period of time when Imagineering was the only company, that was doing Disneyland and those kinds of projects and um, kind of elite in that sense. I'll let this fire sounds like a fire truck's going by. But that could lead you to be sort of insular, and you always solve problems internally. And the best examples, I think, with Imagineering are where we open up and we collaborate with Cirque du Soleil, or we collaborate with the Marvel teams, or we collaborate with scientists, or to really expand our thinking and also bring our creativity to it all at the same time. And same thing in outside the U.S. So I think that, and I think Imagineers have mostly come back from those things saying that was really great. We enjoyed working, with that, in collaboration with that group.
did you find, I think your book does touch on this, but did you find over the years that there's that you have to strike that balance between maintaining the classic Disney magic while pushing those bounds of innovation that they
Yeah.
were that there was challenges that you were
Yeah,
getting?
yeah, yeah. Definitely. You want to, you know, I remember what a shock it was. This is way back when when Michael Eisner was leading the company, and we decided to do a 3D film with Michael Jackson at Disneyland.
Oh,
And
Captain EO.
yeah, Captain EO. So put yourself back to 1984 and imagine Disneyland, the shock factor of suddenly Michael Jackson's in the middle of Disneyland, right? Or George Lucas. And then it took a while, really did take a while to the Pixar, I think, connection was more natural because it was animation, and but the Pixar characters are often in the real world in a contemporary setting. Um, uh, so it took a while, and then Marvel was probably the one that has had such a gigantic impact on the parks worldwide. But it took a while to get the right thing. It took a while to get the right vibe between Marvel and the parks. Kevin Feige is a massive park fan. In fact, Kevin Feige told me that when he went to Disney MGM Studios with his parents, and I had designed it. So I always take this quote. I carry this quote everywhere I go. He said he went with his parents, and that's when he decided to be a filmmaker. So I'm accepting all credit for Kevin Feige being the head of Marvel because he went to Disney MGM Studios. But he was very inspired by it, and but it took a while. And once we started to take Marvel more seriously, do more with it, it really did make a huge difference everywhere. We started in Hong Kong with the first big Marvel project. Um, like you said, we did Guardians of the Galaxy, and there's just more Marvel coming. It's really a great medium for storytelling, and Marvel, Kevin, his team, cast members, they're really excited to be a part of it. They're always wanting to be. That's one thing you find, I'll say, in the park business is people from TV or movies, um, who are famous or have gotten famous. their their world is more ephemeral. The parks are in concrete and they stay for a long time, and they can take their kids to it. They can take their grandkids to it. You find that actors and directors, um, composers, Danny Elfman, good example, somebody who's worked at the parks for a lot. He just loves to do music in the parks. Um, they like working in the parks because it's a different world and it's there for a long time.
Yeah.
And
It's
there's
interesting.
great collaborations come out of that.
It's interesting how the parks have evolved, that they aren't staying stagnant, or probably static, I should say static.
Yeah, static.
And because, like Walt talked about dreaming and this aspect of dreams being from the past, the present, and of the future. And that you've been a big part in helping the parks evolve significantly over the years and influence their direction and where they're going with these futuristic attractions.
I I I think there was a period of time where parks was a little more separate, kind of its own thing. And I think if Walt were back here, if you were going to ask me, like, well, what would Walt say? I'd be very careful to answer anything. But I think one of the things he would say is seamless. Disney is about a seamless relationship between
Mm.
all of the creative venues, and so no walls between animation, Pixar, Lucas, Marvel, film, or parks. That they should all be constantly collaborating. That Walt's vision of Disney was so much the collaboration between everybody, consumer products, publishing, and so that is a really great kind of, it's like cogs in a wheel or something. It's a really great collaboration that works well, and people know. I think in your Disney 101, when you join the company, that's usually the most exciting thing, and it's usually the thing you learn first. Is it's not just about delivering the product you're doing; it's delivering the product that everybody else is involved with. Um, and so that's exciting, and parks becomes often the center of that.
Yeah. Your book, talks about a lot of these high profile projects that you worked on, and particularly with the Tokyo Disney, you had a huge part on that. I think that stands out. I would have to say probably most what I get. Um, would you agree that that project holds a special place in your heart? And if so,
It
why?
will always hold a special place in my heart because I was there for the first one. I was there to develop the second park, Tokyo Disney Seas. I've spent much time there. I still have friends there that we've built parks with. It's a warm, wonderful culture to, be a part of. Uh, but I have very similar feelings about China, about Shanghai. Shanghai was, I would say, a more challenging project than Tokyo was, just because of we didn't know where we were or how to build, and their way of building was different than our way of building, and we ended up in Shanghai with 10,000 workers living on site, coming from farms all over China. Um, but all of these things, whatever they are, they have their own histories and they have um, their challenges. And there's a moment where you think this will never get finished. I don't see a route to finish this. And then one day you wake up and things are getting finished, and then you're standing out in front of the park and everybody's teared up because guests are coming in for the first time, and so and a year later you have a little anniversary party and everybody says that was the best project ever. Time heals all wounds, but they're taxing and they're not short, and you share that. I guess we share that with animation. There are projects that could consume 5 years of your life, or longer, and so you really have to be in shape to do them, and you really have to love it because you're going to go on a long journey on most of these things.
No, you're living that project. You literally
Right.
are living the project day in, day out, night, hour after hour. Yeah. And it
We're
separates you.
definitely in sync, I think, with animation in that sense of these ideas start early. They
Mhm.
take a long time to come to fruition. They take a lot of thinking time. They're highly collaborative. I'd say the group we have the most unusual relationship with is probably television, because television moves like at the gnat of a second, right? Compared to us, our projects take 6 or 7 years,
Wow.
and by the time we've built one of those projects, 2 or 3 iterations of shows have happened or more, so but animation is a real kinship that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Where you we read all about the successes and these projects that you brought to about and that we're enjoying now years later and continue to enjoy. Was there any particular project that you started that you're particularly passionate about that you didn't get past the concept phase that you would have liked to have carried on and carried through to see?
Well, this is the first book that has talked about Disney's America, which was an interesting chapter of the company. It's something um, that uh, we we tried to do a project just outside Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And if you look at the DC audience, uh, it is a good idea. It was always a good idea because the DC audience is actually very much the same as the Walt Disney World audience. But sometime during their kids growing up, they all go to DC or more than one time. And those same people are going on Disney cruises and going to Disney World. And so we looked at the idea of, could we do something in the DC experience that didn't distract from the Disney experience, but created a kind of a compound center of it, a place where you could stay, where we could have things on the American cultural theme, um, great hotels for families, kind of services people are used to having at Disney World, entertainment and pools and resort, plus ways to help you plan your trip and all those things. I think it was fundamentally a good idea. Um, and we had good um, relationships with people from Smithsonian and other areas of DC who were supporting the idea. Eventually, it came down to the real estate was the wrong place. It was potentially a place in Virginia that was going to draw too much traffic and not be positively accepted by some of the people who lived there. So sometimes things, it sounds like a great idea, probably is a great idea. Maybe if we'd have put it somewhere else, it would have been a better idea. There's always ups and downs, but you kind of believe in it, and so at some point it becomes hard to put it down because you really believe it's a good idea. But at some point, there are projects you just put down and say, okay, well, we're not going to do that one, and maybe it'll come back in some other form.
It was an interesting read. I never really thought about, I didn't realize, of course, as you say, it was the first time it's been put down in writing about this American park. But the idea, I guess, in Virginia, you're walking on hallowed ground of the American Revolution, of the
Oh, yeah.
and then how do you present historically that history of that without Disneyfication, without that so
Right.
over,
That was a big factor. Disneyfication was a big factor.
yeah.
Interesting in working with a lot of those institutions later, and I was on the board of the American Indian Museum for the Smithsonian, and I know quite a few of the folks. The immersive approach to storytelling has subsequently become everywhere. It's become what museums and things are trying to do more of, to engage the visitor more in the storytelling and using every tool available, virtual reality and media and music and sound. So as discordant as it sounded back then, I think ultimately the worlds of museums and parks have come more together. Than the missions are different,
Yeah.
but the worlds of how they work together, and they all come together in the industries. The theme park industry consults the museum industry and vice versa. We've all become kind of more of a family today,
Hmm.
even though clearly our missions are different. But it was more difficult at that time.
I agree with you completely, and I think we're seeing, as you say, we're seeing so much more of that, whether it's with the First Nations peoples or with the issues of slavery, or even like the Holocaust Museum. How do
Yeah,
you, how do I experience that, uh, have that experience of what they went through in the 1940s in Nazi Germany? And it's only
yeah,
immersive experience, then you go, okay, I get it. And
Yeah,
that,
and you're trying to have people relate to
yeah,
some to a difficult part of history that maybe we don't want people to forget about because it's important that they remember it, right? And so you don't want to make it cheap. You don't want to make a funny ride out of it because it's not that. But there are ways that you can grip people's emotions. We know we make movies, we make, you know, theater, we know it works. So it's a question of what the role is there and the respect for the topic. And I think that's maybe you started this by asking a thing that, I wanted to do and you were passionate about. I think what I was passionate about was we could have done it, but it would have taken, you know, a lot of maybe a different site, different teams and things. And subsequently, Disney today has the resources, Disney today has National Geographic and the History Channel and ABC News and the resources that could be brought to bear on a project like that today could be that much more powerful. And I think we're in a different place too with history. So, but there's always things out there that you think are great. And sometimes you think you're great and they you don't do them and you find out probably shouldn't have done it, or done it that way. A lot of times it shifts in the middle and you think this is how we're going to do it and you realize there's a better way to do it. And that's just part of the evolution of these projects.
yeah. Did you have any regrets with any projects?
I wouldn't say regrets.
Do-overs? You wanted to have a do-over?
I said, I said honestly in the book, I said I want to put success and failure at the top of the book because
Oh,
these are sometimes successes and there's sometimes failures. And if you build it and it's a failure, you end up fixing it. It's not like you leave it there.
no, you've learned
Um,
from it. Yeah.
and you learn from failure. You learn from failure. And sometimes too much success can lead to failure because you get overconfident, I think. And so um, I don't regret I think anything we've done. I probably could think back. In some ways it's kind of like you don't know how to ski and they take you to the top of the hill and they say, okay, ski down.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
because nobody knows how to do that. Not very many people know how to do this at the beginning. And maybe you get about halfway down the hill and you realize, oh, that's how you do this. And then you get to the bottom, you're done already. If you could go back, would you know more? You'd know more about the team, more about what you can do. I don't call that regret as so much as like, well, in my mind, you could have done probably structured it differently. But generally speaking, the parks open and this is different from movies. The parks open and you have then this time to tone them, to change them, mold them. And I think that's what Walt Disney liked about it was he could mold them and even in his lifetime of a few years since Disneyland was opened, he moved a lot of things around. And that is the fun of it. That is the fun is seeing how guests react and being able to know that you can go in and change things. It's harder to change when it's open, but in Hong Kong Disneyland, we changed the entire castle while the park was operating.
right.
Um, you can do it and it can make positive change.
Now, in reading the book, for me, it really made me want to go back. I mean, we've been to Disney
Oh, I
World.
hope so. I
Oh
hope
yeah,
so. Everybody.
and I'm pulling out the photo album from the 1990s, 91, 95, 96. And there's pictures of me at the Disney MGM studios in the Indiana Jones experience.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm thinking, I want to go back. Now that I've read this, I'm looking at, I have a view now of the parks and of the role that Imagineering plays in creating those experiences. It's amazing.
And
Yeah.
that Indiana Jones experience that you were in is still there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the people there say, well, how can it still be here? It's 25 years old or whatever, 35 years old. And it fills the audience every time. And there are some actors there, they've moved to different roles, but there are some actors there that have been there from the beginning, are so dedicated to that. Um, so there's the parks combine a sense of stewardship and continuity
Right.
and a sense of moving forward. They have to do both. Um, they can't just stay stuck in the mud, right? They have to keep moving forward. But at the same time, you know, you move a park bench and somebody writes you a letter and says that's the park bench my grandparents got engaged on or something. You know, you can't do that. The parks are truly owned by the audience. And so they watch everything. And so you got to recognize the fact that you're working in a venue where the world is always watching and you got to do your best all the time for them.
Yeah. And Disney has always been about that aspect about inspiring dreams right from the very beginning,
Yeah.
dreams and imagination. And now maybe you could talk about how your experience fits into that aspect. I mean, your book is all about dream chasing. Well, I was wondering why did you not call it chasing dreams as opposed to dream chasing?
I don't know. That's a good question. Uh, higher in the alphabet, I guess. No, it would have been lower in the alphabet.
But
The big thing about the title was, you know, we often say you should follow your dreams.
yeah,
And I think in the worlds that we work in, whatever creative or innovation world you work in, it's not about following. It is about chasing because they're elusive and you might wake up in the morning and have a dream, but you got a long ways to go before you can make that into something. And you probably have to take a lot of people with you, convince them to help you make it into something. Um, so that was the idea of dream chasing. And I think I forgot your question. But
the
that,
the aspect of how Disney always inspires dreams and imagination, how it
yeah, I think dreaming, you know, imagination and dreaming is there's a it goes back to this idea of a day at Disneyland and does it open up possibilities for you? And a lot of I've just now started rolling out with the book and doing signatures and things like that. And I'm amazed at the sort of life stories that I get from people
yeah,
or from their kids who have been inspired by the parks and they want to be an Imagineer or they want to be a park ride designer, um, or people who, you know, started going there as kids and now they go, you know, as parents. It is a there's a connection there.
yeah,
Um, and you know, you think of a book possibly as I don't, but some people do. I think of as a kind of an old-fashioned thing, but there is something about a book that people value and they value that little moment they have to talk to you about it. I feel like the luckiest person on earth in that sense to have had the editor, you know, want to do the book and be able to do the book and be able to have the book out there. It's just like a a crazy thing. And the other reason I'm the luckiest person on earth is because next week I have a second book coming out.
oh, what? Part two.
And I'm so lucky. I feel so lucky. Dream Chasing is the memoir, is nonfiction. And this book is called Ghost Dog, is
Oh,
fiction, which is coming out on October 15th, I think. And it's a story about a family at the Haunted Mansion. And I thought I'd bring it up to you because the it's not a kid's story, it's kind of a young adult story. But the illustrator is a good friend of mine. His name is George Scribner,
okay.
and he's a wonderful director from Disney past. He directed Oliver and Company in 1988, and he's done 35 illustrations for the book. And it's just a fun. It was another COVID product for me. It was a story of at the end of the Haunted Mansion, if you remember, as you're just about to step off the vehicle, they say a ghost will follow you home, and you look into a mirror, and there's a ghost sitting between you.
Yeah.
And I just had the idea, well, what if a ghost dog follows you home and really does follow you home? And so in this book, a ghost dog does follow a family home. And most of it takes place outside Disneyland, actually. It takes place at their home. And it's what it's like when you have a haunted mansion ghost living around your backyard and that kind of thing. So it's fun. It's a fun read, I think. And it's coming out in another week.
Great premise. We look forward to seeing that. As you were talking, it made me think about many animators I've interviewed, whether it's John Musker, Ron Clements, or
Yeah. Wonderful people.
right? Yeah, and they always and when people are in line and they're getting their autograph or signature, and they say, "You drew my childhood." And
Yeah.
what you're saying that you created our childhood. When I we go to these experiences at Disneyland, and we as kids in the 70s, we would drive down from Vancouver in the station wagon, a family of four,
Yeah. See?
the I-5, and that was our destination. The end game, right, was to get to Disneyland and to experience that. And that's all we had for that. We lived on those dreams and those visions and those memories for years. Couldn't
Yeah, and
wait.
then you can until you can come back. No, exactly. I think that's the magic of it.
Yeah.
And for me, going back to Ghost Dog for a second, um, I I people always ask me my favorite attraction, and I have favorites that I worked on, like Pirates in Shanghai and Tron, and
Yeah.
Tower of Terror and things like that. But a lot of my favorites are things that I grew up with. So I grew up in Southern California. So I grew up. I was there when the Haunted Mansion opened,
Yeah.
and I have always loved the Haunted Mansion before I really knew who did it or that there was an Imagineering. And then you find out about Ex Atencio and Claude Coates and Mark Davis and
Yeah.
Paul Frees, who did the narration, and I remember thinking, I'll never do anything like that. I'll never do anything like the Haunted Mansion. It's a master to me. It's a masterpiece. And then I thought, well, the one thing you could do is you could just write a book about like how much you love it. And so that's where this book came out. It came out with somebody who loves it and trying to put an original story to it. So I'm going to do that again. I think I'm going to do.
Great stuff.
I talked to Kevin Feige. He wrote a back cover on Ghost Dog,
Okay.
and it's really nice. And as did Leslie Iwerks, but his cover was nice because what he talked about was the parks have inspired him. They inspire movies, and so taking stories that are original from that start in the parks and then move on from there. He really likes that idea, so I'm hoping to be able to do some more of those.
We didn't touch on it yet, but your book, of course, talks about you as a young man going into the career. Um, uh, when we look at your path, it wasn't a straight trajectory to going into working at Disney. It was quite unexpected. Maybe you
Yeah.
could talk a little bit about your college credits and what you were taking in college, because there's a lot of young creatives today will be looking at this and going, "Boy, I'd like to turn my dreams into reality. How can I do that?"
Right. No, I think you can. I think they can, and I'm always encouraging to people that they can. And I would say that for me, the combination that ended up serving me um, was I had a theater background, which is of course an artistic storytelling, performance-based background. But I also got a degree in architecture, so I had sort of not an engineering side, but a design side. So I had the idea of complex problem solving, programming, because a lot of people say, well, theme parks are just like gingerbread, right? But a theme park is a place where 50 or 60,000 people stay all day long. So it's a big public place that requires design and planning and all that stuff. So I had that planning side, but also the focus on storytelling. So I think when I was able to finally get in, I was able to use both those skills. I think other people who come in have either strong storytelling um, backgrounds, and that could be writing. It doesn't have you don't have to be an artist. You could be a writer. You could be a storyteller. You might be an animator. A lot of animators have become great theme park designers, um, architects. There's an enormous need for people who have creative, technical sensibilities. If you think about ride design, ride is not about putting tracks together or ride and safety. It's all those things, but what it's really about is how do I make this fun for people in this,
Right.
I get thrown up and then I get pushed down into the seat and then I get pushed this way and and then how do I tell that story physically with their, you know, their viscera. Um, so the nice thing going back to the hundred professions I said are there, and this could and this advice goes for universal development or or lots of different places that are in the park world, is it's having something that you're passionate about and looking at it through a storytelling lens. And
Yeah.
these days, if you're in college, whatever you're studying, um, keep a great presentation about it. Be able to present yourself, be able to say, these are some things I've worked on that I think are interesting, and be able to talk about that. You have to be able to present yourself. And these days it's on a online portfolio. We used to carry books around. But I think the idea of showing what drives you and ideas you have is really important to that process. And the other thing is, I don't think young people should think that their only avenue is to go straight to Imagineering. There's a group called IAPA, IAAPA. You may know of it. It's a great group. There's another group called the TEA, the Theme Park Entertainment Association. And both of those organizations, which started out kind of as trade organizations in the business, they're both really focused on young people now, on refreshing the next generation, because a lot of the people who founded the park business are retiring. They're getting old, and so there's a big desire to get new talent in, and there's lots of ways to enter the business.
There's a tendency too, I think, for young people to focus just on technology and not thinking about creativity. And as you say, creativity can come in many, many forms. And I think that's what you're looking for, is that creative individual. I know when I talk to my students, I said, like, show it, whether it's in macrame or knitting, but also
Yeah.
through work or metal foundry work or whatever. All of those things can come into that field. That
Yeah, the
should,
more understanding you have of creativity, of artistry, of things you've tried, even if it's even if you happen to be more heavily technical, it's combining those things and showing how you think is really a big deal. And then, one of the things that Walt Disney it is said that he said to all of his people is to go to the parks once a week and just sit there,
yeah.
and so that you are connected to the audience, where whatever public place, public attractions, parks, whatever you have around you, get out there and see what people do, because the more we know about human behavior, the more we can design great experiences for people.
Yeah. No, similar. When I talk to my animator students, or animation students, I should say, I said, get out and enjoy nature. Nature is going to inspire you. Don't
Yeah,
get off the computer.
things move. They see how things move, see how things light.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100% agree with you. I 100% agree. And I notice everywhere I go, um, the prettiest, you know, arboretum, people walking through, uh, reading their text.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we could all do to set our phones aside and look at the world a little bit. We live in a very complex, difficult world. Goes back to the Disneyland ethic of putting people in a world where it feels a little more fun and comfortable for a day. But living with your whole self, is a big part of it, and what you can absorb from that is huge. We still have at Imagineering, there's a group. It's a grassroots group. They pay for it, but they do it on campus. They still have life drawing,
Oh,
and that's you think of that as something that's gone way long ago, and the artists get together on, I think it's Thursday nights or something like that. They do life drawing. It's just so important to that world.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah. People are detached. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about your experience, those 4 decades. How did you ever accomplish what you did pre-digital? Like there was no cell phones, no.
Well, I had a guy that I had an older Imagineer who had worked in the Walt era that I worked with,
Like,
and he
or,
said he said we built Disneyland with no Xerox machines,
right.
and I thought to myself, we all thought, how could that possibly be? No Xerox machines, you built Disneyland, and then you know 5 years later we'd built Tokyo Disneyland with no computers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then now you look back and say, how could you possibly build anything without computers? So or without digital simulations, you know, but there are old-fashioned techniques. Sometimes, you know, you go back and eventually, in the parks at least, it becomes an experience. And that's why, um, as much as you can simulate in VR or something how a ride is going to work, and that's really important, it's critical to the way we work now, we still build models, and it's still, you know, you build these big models that you are big enough to roll through, and you sit on a little stool with wheels and you push people through. And it's all lit and everything, because a ride is a story in motion. And so having you be able to, and you can do it very effectively in a cave or in VR, but it's harder to do with a group. You know, you kind of want a group to be able to critique it and say, well, I didn't look this way, I didn't look that way. There's just it's I'd say the best thing to do is embrace all tools, and don't assume that because you can now draw everything on the computer that you don't still need a pencil. They all serve you in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the master carpenter. He knows every tool and how to use it and when to use
Right.
it. You don't,
Exactly.
yeah, you're not going to use your hammer as a screwdriver, but you
Exactly.
a screwdriver as a hammer. Um, how do you see Imagineering evolving now? We're talking, your book, of course, talks about the past, but where is it going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's for the you know, the folks that are there now who have new visions of things. I think there will be certain things that stay the same, like storytelling and, you know, uh, how you create magic, how you tell stories in unique ways. The technology will keep rapid, fast changing, and, you know, oftentimes the technology isn't just, it's usually not technology, it's because somebody needed it to tell a story that they didn't have before. So the technology has to advance to get there. But I think that the good thing about parks is people like to go back to them, and when they go back they expect to see some of what they've seen before, and they also expect to see things new, so there will always be an agenda and of things to do in the existing parks, and there's always more audience. You know, there's uh there's no Disney park in a lot of parts of the world, so there's plenty of opportunity.
Yeah. Your book was an amazing book. When people read it, what message would you hope that people are taking away from it with that spirit of Imagineering and bringing dreams to life?
I would say a hopefulness that dreams are worth pursuing. Your dreams are worth pursuing. Your dreams are good. Aligning yourself and aligning others with them, and aligning yourself with other people's dreams. Dreaming is a great thing, and it puts us outside of the known of what we do. And it's okay if they're hard to do. It's okay if they're, you know, if it's a marathon, it's a healthy thing, right? That I feel positive about that. And you know, it's something you can do your whole life. And so everybody should, you know, whatever it is, um, feel free to don't ever be shy about pushing your dreams forward.
And yeah, dreams don't always happen immediately. It's a
And
journey.
don't be discouraged. Never be discouraged. It's a journey. And you learn from each one, whether you pull them all together or not. It's more about the drive to keep trying.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, it's been a real pleasure talking with you about your experiences and your story. I encourage everybody to get a copy of Dream Chasing. It's an amazing experience. And like I said, I want to relive those experiences myself. I'm going to definitely plan to go back to Disney World and Disneyland. I don't know if I'll drive down in a station wagon, but I want to be there.
There's better ways to get down there now, I think.
Yeah. And and if I go back to Tokyo, I'll tell you, we were in Tokyo just when COVID hit and we couldn't get in. We left the day they shut down and
Uh,
we
yeah.
came back. It was already happening in Asia, as you know, your book talks about that. And so we'll have to have a do-over when we get to Tokyo and go to see.
Yeah, those were tough times. Those were tough times, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a real
Well,
pleasure though.
Keith, So nice to talk with you. I look forward to seeing the piece, and I really appreciate your time and reading the book and having the chat about it.
Thank you so much. You've been very generous with us. Thank you.